Well, as I shared with the kids, I'm going to focus on the subject of light today. And there are several readings throughout the Bible. Here, I have a few short ones that I'm going to share with you to get us into this. First is from Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2. You often hear this at Christmas. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. Then Isaiah 60, verses 1 through 3. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of God has risen upon you. For darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples, but God will arise upon you. God's glory will appear over you. Nations will come to your light, and rulers to the brightness of your dawn. And then from the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through the Word, and without the Word, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in the Word was life, and the life was the light of all peoples. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. And finally, John 8, or actually there's two more. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And finally, Matthew chapter 5. Jesus said to his disciples, which is to us, you are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before other people, so that they may see your good works and give glory to God in heaven. All right, well, as most of you know, I usually try to come up with something humorous to begin my messages. So here's a couple of light jokes. Light travels faster than sound. That's why some people appear bright until you hear them speak. What happened when the candle went dating? It found the perfect match. I know, they get worse, descending. What did one light bulb say to the other? I love you, Watts and Watts. All right, I'm done. Obviously, we're focusing on light this morning. Oh, Skylar can't even stand that. Oh, yeah. I'm focusing on light this morning. Light is a big deal in the Bible. It's a big deal in every major religious tradition. A symbol of God. In the first sentence spoken in the Bible, or by God in the Bible, the beginning of creation, as I shared with the kids, God said, Genesis 1:3, 3 verses in, let there be light. That started it all. It was the energy of creation. The force of life itself. And the Bible then said, and it's good. In fact, the Bible says it's very good, right in the beginning. So this source of life and light behind everything that's good and true and beautiful, that's what we're talking about when we talk about the light of God. It's also the key to understanding who the people of Israel were, the Jewish people, Jesus' people, and also who Jesus was and is, and who we are. And I don't have time to unpack all of that, but as you've heard me say many times, the Jewish people had a mission given to them by God, and it was to be a light to the nations. The nations, the same word, Gentiles, it means everybody else. Their purpose was not to be better than anyone. Their purpose was to show the rest of the world what it would look like if people, as a people, not just isolated individuals, but as a society, would embrace the light and love of God as their organizing principle and core truth. That's who the Jews are supposed to be. That was their job, to be a blessing. And this is an oversimplification, but Jesus was the light of God fully manifested in one human being. That's what the Bible tells us, the incarnation, that all that fullness of light, called the Word in the Gospel of John, but that all the fullness, the essence of God, was poured fully into one human life. And Jesus, and he went all the way. A baby had to grow up into it, become aware of it, nurture it, expand it. But Jesus was that. And if we want to know what the light and love of God would look like in a human life, that's Jesus. And his real mission, though, was not, hey, worship me. It was, I'm showing you now how to do this. How to unify your own human existence with the love of God. Okay? So that's who Jesus was. That's who we are. This whole journey is about trying to fan the coals within ourselves as individuals and as a community. Now, I said, the mission is to magnify the presence of the light. I shared with the kids that there's a light of God in all of us. The Bible, the first time it refers to it, it talks about being made in the image of God. And so this is, whether you're an atheist or not, it doesn't matter. According to our faith, there is what the Quakers first called a spark of the divine in every human life. And the Quakers, that's what that belief of theirs, that whether you believe in Jesus or not, that the spark of God is in you, everybody, the light is in you. If you really believe that, the Quakers said, well, that's why they couldn't serve in the war. That's why they became a peace church. They said there's no reason good enough, as far as we're concerned, to ever deliberately kill another human being, because the spark of God is in that person. Just sit with the implications of saying, okay, I'm going to try to live as though every human being on the planet, including those who have lost their way completely, including those who have hurt you most, they still have the spark of God in them. And so much of what the spiritual life is about is just trying to let that spark turn into a blazing light, so that you no longer just have a little spark, but you are the light. Now, let's face it, none of us do that perfectly. And when Jesus says, you're the light of the world, my initial response is, oh man, if I'm the light of the world, then we're in big trouble. And by the way, he didn't say any one individual is. He said you was plural. You together, when you connect your individual light together, you are the light of the world. That's our mission. Right? So let's just stop for a second. Do you know that there's the light of God inside you? That even in your darkest moments, it hasn't been extinguished. That's just another expression of grace, huh? You can forget it's there. You can get lost in some egocentric, self-destructive, other-destructive journey and completely disregard the implications of God's presence. But it's still there. And this whole journey is really about awakening to that and just nurturing that presence on purpose and letting it get as bright and beautiful as it possibly can. So think for just a sec of a person who comes to mind when you say, I've known a few people who are really glowing with the light of God. Who might that person be? Someone who showed you by example what this looks like. Not perfectly. No one does it perfectly. But someone who just radiated the love of God's presence. If you happen to have daily contact with such a person, you are blessed indeed. Because as I shared with the kids, I mean, that person is helping remind you, just by being aglow, of what life is all about. And it's okay if you lose it completely. Don't beat yourself up. This isn't about any guilt trips of those of us who don't shine or just aren't feeling it. It's a reminder that the spark, the fire is already there. And all we got to do is say, God, grow that flame, please. When I think of somebody in this world who's full of the light, one of the persons who comes to mind immediately is the Dalai Lama. Which is a nice way also of saying this isn't only for Christians. That light is in every religious tradition. And when I thought about the Dalai, the things that came to mind that make me say that are things like this. First of all, joy. And you don't have to go around being all happy clappy all the time in order to have the light burning with you. We all do it in a different way. But there's this radiant peacefulness in that man. I think about kindness. Especially the kindness that costs you. In one of the books that the Dalai Lama wrote or was interviewed, he said that one of his greatest concerns was that one time when he was in captivity after having been tortured, his greatest concern, or he might have been referring to a monk, but the point is, the greatest concern was they started to have hard feelings toward their captors. And he said, the Dalai Lama said, they took everything from me. They're not going to take my peace. I think of courage. I think of transparency. You just don't ever get the feeling with the Dalai Lama, or maybe some of the persons it might be someone you know personally, but you don't get the feeling that there's something going on behind the scenes that if you knew about it, it would let you down. There's something hidden. And I think of a commitment to justice, for fairness, especially for people who have the hardest road. So the question today is, are you shining? It's okay if you're not. If your light's a little dim and just be honest about it. It's all right. But then what's your own next step in rekindling the light or protecting it? Are you availing yourself of the opportunities to get a jar around you? And as I move toward a close, I want to say this. Sometimes when we talk about light, it's all sweet. And, oh, isn't that nice? This little light of mine, I'm going to let... I mean, it's a great children's song. I love it. But it almost feels kind of trite. Or love, light, and namaste. It's a cliche. And if it's just a cliche or a buzzword or a catchphrase or a bumper sticker or a Lululemon t-shirt, it's not going to transform the world. And that's why I want you to hear a gutsier message this morning. The light of God that we read about in the Bible, that Jesus manifested, that we are invited to nurture within ourselves, is the strongest empire-defying force in the universe. It's not just a nice little thing that might flicker out. Imagine a room that's completely black. You light one candle and it's no longer dark. The Bible says the light is stronger than the darkness. Now we got to get that. This last week, I had a conversation with a dear member of our church. I'll let this person remain anonymous. But the person said, in essence, I'm having kind of a faith crisis. And it's not that I don't believe in God. It's that I don't believe in people. I don't think we're going to do the right thing. I really appreciated the honesty, and I think a lot of people are feeling that way these days. And you know, I don't believe in people per se, because I, like all of you, am not the least bit naive as to what human beings are capable of doing to each other when we forget who we are. But I believe more strongly than ever in the light of God in every human being. That is strong enough to face any challenge, any darkness. And that's the good news today. And so our job is to keep bringing things to the light. First of all, ourselves. And in our own personal lives, I mean, one of the things that the light does is it shows what's hidden. If you got stuff in the shadows of your life, yeah, you get close to God and it's going to expose what's in the shadows, not to bust you, not to humiliate you, but so that you'll be honest and bring it to the surface so that love and grace can heal it and transform it. And in the world, God's light will reveal, name, and unmask things that are being done in secret, that are unjust, so that justice can be done. Just one example. Last week when I was at the Wild Goose Festival, this progressive Christian festival, one of the speakers was Jim Wallace, who's the founder of the Sojourners community in Washington, D.C. And this is what Jim said. He said, as far as I'm concerned, voting rights is the number one issue right now. He said, you know, there's been a lot of talk about the last election having been stolen, the big steal. And he went on to say that's nonsense. But he said, what's really important for us to deal with is the fact that right now there are powers in this world who are planning to steal the upcoming elections. And they're doing it primarily through secretive, hidden political techniques such as gerrymandering. And that's why just this last week, our members of our own racial justice ministries group put together a form letter that we will be making available through our church to call upon our elected representatives not to stand against gerrymandering. If you don't know what that is, it's reforming the boundaries in voting districts in order to skew an election a certain way. So there may be and it's used most often in neighborhoods and districts where there are large minority populations, which will tend to vote a certain way, and to break up them as a voting bloc so that their voting power is less and they lose the elections even though the popular vote in that region would have gone a different way. That's stealing an election. And it's legal so far. And it's racist. And so I thank God. I didn't ask anybody to do this. And you know, it's radical people from this church like Levon Giesland who are behind this nefarious activity. And Judy Tabor. Thank God for your efforts. So the light will expose what's going on in secret. But even then, not to point a finger at some opponent of ours or yours and humiliate them. The light of God always does it in love, with a way of saying, hey, I'm not saying you're my enemy. I'm just saying I have issues with what you're doing. Let's talk about it. We can do better. All right, well, I'm going to close. Now I'm not just coming toward a close, I'm closing. I also saw a friend of mine who's a songwriter at this event last week, and he has a song called Just One Candle. I'm going to share the lyrics with you, and then we'll be ready for communion. He wrote this in the late 1990s when he took a trip to Sarajevo, Bosnia, and was blown away, probably not a good metaphor, by the violence and the hatred that had caused people to kill each other. And while he was over there trying to sing and work for justice and for peace, one of his close friends in the States died. And he got the word while he was over there. And you'll hear that in the song. Here's the lyrics. It says, "The closest I've flown to the face of a war was into Sarajevo on a wing and a prayer. The shells didn't fly from the hills anymore, but the people were haunted, and there was fear in the air. And the city was cratered from the shells and the rounds like rain on a puddle, like the face of the moon. They buried the bodies till they filled up the ground in the grass on the highway because they'd run out of room. But the people have gathered in the middle of town with the songs they hold sacred of a time coming soon. From their different traditions, they're singing the sound of their future together. They're singing in tune." And here's the chorus. "And all the darkness in the world can't extinguish the light of just one candle. All the darkness in the world can't extinguish the light of just one candle. I got word overseas that an old friend had died. She was bright-eyed and laughing. She was gone far too young. My body and spirit felt hollow inside, and I wanted to cry out, but no words would come. So I walked through the night in a dangerous town where the gunfire can sound like the 4th of July. But I looked up by chance, and the stars shining down tore the wind from my lungs and the rain from my eyes. Because just like my friend, those stars are now gone. And that light's been traveling for thousands of years. So the light that we shine seems to go on and on like those rays across the cosmos to refract through my tears. And all the darkness in the world can't extinguish the light of just one candle." And here's the really powerful part. So you can shrug and say love is a powerless tool, that the real world is heartless, and that hope is for fools. But I've watched for the sunrise, and the truth is I've found it's not light that's fragile, it's the other way around. You hear that? It's not light that's fragile. Don't be intimidated or impressed by the brokenness and darkness of this world. It is no match for the light of God.